Hello everyone and welcome. In this video we are going to learn about a very important concept in Aptos, which is signer. Now if you can see, we have a basic smart contract here. We have a user profile which has a key, so we can store this in the global storage. It has two fields. The first is the name and the second one is the balance. We have a public enter function here which is going to initialize the profile. Now as you can see, we have this reference to the signer as the first parameter which we call user. The next parameter is the name. Let's look at how we are going to create and transfer this user profile to the signer. Then we are going to talk about what signer is. First of all, I'm going to call the function move to, and this is going to move the object to a specific user. The user that is going to move is this user, which is the signer. And then we create the object here. You can create the object outside of this function and just give the variable name to this function. Or if you don't want to waste the variable, a little bit memory, and also you don't want to clutter up the code, you can also define it in here. In this user profile, we will going to need a name, and here we get the name from the parameter. Instead of saying name, we can just say name because the field name and the parameter name are the same. We have the balance and we are going to initialize the balance with 0. Now, this signer is the user who actually made this transaction. So this is a special type of, let's say, a variable, and we are going to import this from standard library of Aptos. So let's say if I initialize this transaction, then I am the signer. If someone else initializes the transaction, then that person is the signer. With the move to function, we are not moving to an address, but we are moving to a signer which has the address inside. Now let's look at the next function to understand how we can extract the address from the signer. First of all, we have the function which is for updating the user balance, and we are going to get the user as the parameter, which is our signer. Here we use the keyword acquires because this function actually uses this user profile. As you can see in this line, we are borrowing this user profile, and since this user profile will be used during this function and it will be not available while this function is running, we indicate this with this acquire keyword. So if we are acquiring something from the global storage and use it in the function, we need to say this while starting our function in the signature of our function. In this line, I'm extracting the address from the signer. For that, I'm going to say signer address of. So I'm using this address of function from the signer, and I'm going to pass my signer, which is the user parameter here. Now, this function is going to extract the address from the signer, and I'm going to store this in the user address. Now, I'm going to get this user profile. Since I have created this object and moved it to the signer, this user, I can actually get it back as I gave it in the first place. For this, I'm going to say borrow global mute. I'm going to say borrow global mute because we are borrowing a global variable and we are going to borrow this mutably, meaning that we are going to change something on this variable. If I wasn't going to change anything in this variable, if I just want to read some data, then I would just say borrow global. With this borrow global mute function, we know that we are going to retrieve some data and we are going to make some changes on it. Between these parentheses, we are going to give the type of the data or the type of the structure that we want to retrieve. And for our case, it's user profile. We are going to give the address. So from which address you want to extract this object? So the address that I'm giving here is user address, which we extracted from this signer in the line above. We have our user profile that we have passed here, and it's called profile. Now I'm going to say profile.balance, which is going to give me this balance, which is 0 at this moment. Then we are going to call coin balance. So this is going to give us the balance of the user address. Borrow global mute, we are going to give the type of coin that we want to get the balance of, and then we are going to pass the address. So I am saying give me the balance from this address for this type of coin with this line. And this is going to get the total Aptos coin that is in this user's profile, and then it's going to update the balance accordingly. Now, if you look at the last function, transfer user coins, we are going to make a transfer. For this, I'm going to say coin transfer like we used coin before for the coin balance. Now we want to transfer some tokens. And then we are going to give the name of the token or the type of the token. In our case, it's Aptos coin. For the parameters, I'm going to say from this signer. So the first parameter will be the signer. It's not going to be an address, but the second one will be an address. The reason that the first one is not an address but a signer is for the security measures, so that this function can only be run by the person who actually sends this transaction. And finally, we are going to pass the amount parameter, which is a U64. And this is going to transfer from this signer, and it's going to extract the signer's address like we did here above. Then it's going to transfer to this address, which is going to take it from the parameter. And finally, this much of an amount that it's going to transfer. These functions are not the best practices. We don't know if we have enough tokens and so on, so we can actually check for some errors and we can develop it much more. But the key idea is for you to understand in this lesson what the signer is and how we can make use of it. So again, the signer is the one who is actually sending the transaction. Signer has an address, and in some cases we are going to use signer directly, and in other cases we can extract this address of the signer who sent the transaction. So thank you very much for listening on this video, and I will see you on the next lesson.